Hello interwebs! Today we got something really exciting, and that is the first trailer for Star Trek Lower Decks, the first animated series for Star Trek since Star Trek the Animated Series all the way back in the 70s. I've made no bones about the fact that I am very excited for this show, but I also know it is one of the most controversial Star Trek shows that are on the slate right now for Star Trek, and that is saying something considering how controversial Star Trek has unfortunately gotten over the past few years. But that's beside the point. I am very excited, and I am very excited to check out this trailer, so I'm going to do something slightly new for this video. I'm actually going to do a live react to the trailer right here on this video. Now, to be fair, I have already seen this trailer once, about like a few hours ago, but I have not had a chance to really analyze it or download it or really like think about it all too much. So I have already seen it, but I am going to do a live, more thoughtful reaction right here in front of you for the camera. And then after that, I will do my more in-depth thoughts about what I think about Star Trek Lower Decks coming up right after that. So let's jump in. I gotta say, the first time I watched this, I did really like these visuals. I think the visuals throughout all this thing is really well done, especially the space stuff and the ship stuff. I think it looks really gorgeous in animation. It's clearly like a 3D animation style here for the ship, but it looks great. I also like her like casual look there with her shirt. It's like slightly unbuttoned, her TNG uniform. This kind of interaction between the crew here feels very like Rick and Morty to me. Okay, so let me just put this phone down. I very much liked it. I can definitely see why this show is not to everyone's taste. It feels like it's a very particular niche audience, but honestly, I'm the kind of person that really likes, that really just likes seeing tearing down and deconstruction of universes that I love. I mean, one of the things that kind of always surprised me, and this is kind of getting into the negative reaction of the show, there are certain like negative aspects of the Star Trek fandom, we all are aware of them, who are like, who is the show for? Why do we want it? I don't want a comedic Star Trek. And I'm like, well, Star Trek has always had comedic episodes going back all the way to Shore Leave. That's like the 10th or 11th episode of the original series, and one of the most lauded episodes of the original series, which is Trouble with Tribbles, is a comedic episode. So you've always had comedy in Star Trek, and then also a lot of those same people like the show The Orville, which is a comedic take on Star Trek. So this like that criticism weirds me out, but not to focus on that too much. But I understand how like a comedic animated Star Trek show is going to be a very niche taste. This is not going to be like Star Trek Discovery or Star Trek Picard level of ratings or notice or awareness. So I totally get that. And if it's going to be niche, I like that it's doing two things. That it's sort of deconstructing, kind of making fun of the tropes that we know Star Trek has. This sort of like spear, like no one's dying from a spear in the 24th century. I think that's like a really strong sort of way to use the animated format. And then also, I really liking, from what I saw in that trailer, like exploring the elements of Star Trek that we kind of all knew had to be a thing, like the like cleaning of the holodeck waste is something like people always wondered that when we were like talking about how holodecks work. Like whenever us nerds sit down and like, how do the holodecks work? How do they get matter in there? Like, do they transport matter in and things like that? So like this idea that there is waste in the holodeck machine makes sense to me, and I like seeing that we're like getting like weird nitty-gritty explanations to how the actual like technical side of Star Trek works. And I think that this is a great way to show those like elements of Star Trek that we always like, us nerds sit down and talk about and like really question, really overthink, but you're never really going to ever have time for that sort of discussion on like Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Discovery, Picard, blah blah. So I think that this can use that humorously while also really fleshing out that side of things within the Star Trek universe. And I think that that's really great. I mean, I think it's actually kind of fun that this show is canon, that it can have a more comedic take on Star Trek that again has been there from the beginning, but also use that to flesh out something that we've never really seen in Star Trek before, the lower decks of Star Trek. And the other thing too is I like how Mike McMahon, the showrunner of this show, is a really big fan of Star Trek The Next Generation and has said that he wants to have Next Generation cameos in the show, because I know a lot of people were upset with the direction of Picard, and even I like Picard, I like Star Trek Picard, but I understand that it didn't feel like the sequel to The Next Generation that a lot of people wanted. Like, we've wanted for years to see what happened to the Star Trek world post-Nemesis, and while we did get a little bit on Picard, it didn't really feel like the Starfleet world that we really wanted to get, and have only really gotten in novels or Star Trek Online. So this show can finally give us that. Like, what is Starfleet doing post-Nemesis? And what is the sort of political landscape of the Star Trek world post-Nemesis? And so I like that this is giving us a little bit of that flavor while also kind of being a sequel, also delving. It's just doing all the things that I think a lot of people really want but haven't been thinking about in sort of very clear terms. And the fact that this is a comedy and an animated show is sadly obfuscating, I think, those elements of this show that I think are really going to be critical to its success in the long run. That it's giving us all these little pieces of Star Trek that we've always kind of talked about and wanted, but have never gotten. And it's just coming in a package that we didn't really ever expect it to. And I think that's the best way to do a show. Give us something that we didn't expect, but exactly what we wanted. And so for all those reasons, I'm very excited for Lower Decks. The characters, I didn't even really talk much about the characters, but we did kind of get little bits of their personality traits. They all seem like, we'll see how I've ended up investing in them, but they all seem to have fairly interesting, if kind of standard Star Trek arcs, like one person wants to be a captain, one person wants to be a warrior, I'm sure one wants to be a science officer. So all of that kind of, fits into the Star Trek mold, maybe, but we're sort of seeing the command track to get there that we've only really seen in, like, Ensign Tilly on Discovery. So I'm sure I'll like the characters. It remains to be seen what specific elements of those characters I'll hook into, if I hook into them at all. But in terms of just general arcs for those characters, those seem like solid arcs that you can really dig into a lot within an animated show. So solid start there, but again, nothing much to talk about because it doesn't feel particularly unique on a character front just yet. But what did all of you think? Were you excited by the Star Trek Lower Decks trailer? Do you think it's going to be a horrible show? Do you think it's going to be a great show? Do you wish that they weren't doing this type of show in Star Trek? I'd love to hear all those thoughts down in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe for all my reviews of Star Trek Lower Decks coming up when the show airs next month, as well as all my other Star Trek and geek culture topics and discussions. I also do a podcast, so check those out, What the Frel and Star Trek Behind the Lines. You can find both of those on any podcast platform that you want. But beyond subscribing, podcasts, commenting, all that fun stuff, I just hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. Thank you so much to all my patrons who support me over on Patreon. And an extra special thanks to my commander level and above patrons, Ashley Allen Bocello, Miranda Janelle, Eli Berg-Moss, Ashlyn Solstice, Christina Dalliance, Greg Gillum, Boyd and Mary Beth Earl, Wayne Twitchell, Ish the Mad, Buttoneer, Randy Thompson, Mouse Pounder, Jemshin, Susan Banks, Wellington Marcus, Lorena Mesa, Alexander Miller, John Steele, William Stewart, Michael Beam, Gavin Robinson, Aaron Brown, Christy Marie Johnson, Jason Knott, Maggie Evans, Maeve, Subraxis, Zach Cody, Dante St. James, Wen Dizzle Bizzle, Auntie Cat 808, Patrick Shannon, Din Hagney, Mark the Edge, Bree Beecher, Polly Mina, and Gretchen Badger. Thank you to all of you. I couldn't do this without you, so thank you so much for your support.